Not too long ago, there was a time when the internet felt like a digital Wild West. It was chaotic, and you actually had to look for things that you wanted. Piercing dial-up tones, GIFs that were high-tech at the time, and colorful websites that were clearly more passion project than corporate billboard. And for a lot of us, our first step into this 1024 by 768 gateway was the school computer lab. And memories were made in our 10 minutes of free time in that room. Memories being made with browser-based flash games. And for some people, this was their first experience with video games in general. And for others, it was a unique experience completely separate from their consoles at home. So let's take a step back and look beyond the nostalgia and about how these simple distractions became a powerful catalyst for a generation's creativity and freedom of expression. Let's take a trip back before app stores and before massive corporations bought up every IP in existence. From the early 2000s to the early 2010s, websites like Newgrounds, Kongregate, and Armor Games were ground zero for a creative big bang. And this was all driven by one simple idea: access. The software behind it all, Macromedia, later Adobe Flash, bundled animation, art, and coding all into one package that was surprisingly easy to pick up. Adobe Flash was powering everything at the forefront of websites, from moving images, videos, advertisements, and eventually interactive experiences, and this blew the doors wide open for browser-based games. You didn't need a publisher, a huge budget, or a team of expert programmers to make and release a video game. You could be a teenager in your bedroom with a wild idea. And with a little bit of effort, you could upload that creation for millions of people to see. And the software was extremely versatile. You'd be playing a stick figure fighting game one day, and the next a clever puzzle game, and the day after that, a surprisingly deep RPG that some kid across the world made in their spare time. And this eventually could translate into more than just a hobby. It was the birth of a new kind of creative freedom, one that was messy, unfiltered, and absolutely brilliant. And if your goals were beyond creativity, there was a financial incentive too. Popular games could rack up millions of plays, which translates to real ad revenue for the creator and for the website hosting the game. Flash games even went on to birth new genres, some of which are still around to this day, especially when you look at mobile games. And honestly, the perfect example of this is tower defense games. And tower defense existed before Flash, but Flash is where it really found its footing, and that's where it was mastered. Games like Bloons Tower Defense went on to make quite a bit of money in the mobile space. Even one of the biggest tower defense games that exists now, the Kingdom Rush series, was first released as a browser game. I mean, it was almost like a lab environment. It was community-driven development where creators could see what was popular and what was working, and if something was working, they could build on it, and it allowed entire genres to evolve at lightning speed, all inside of a browser window. And while you did have a lot of sadistic and uber-violent games coming out around that time, there was still a level of innocence to it all. They were just trying to make games that they thought were fun. Typically, the only form of revenue usually came from skippable ads that played while the game was loading, which is kind of interesting to think about now, where we live in an era where we're being bombarded with ads like we're getting a fucking brain dance in Cyberpunk. When you look past a lot of the revenue-focused, bigger Flash game sites, there were a lot of creators using Flash games as a new way to express personal, artistic, or controversial ideas. With a low barrier to entry and using the internet's anonymity, it allowed for a new kind of raw expression that was impossible to be gatekept. And there's a fair amount of examples of this. In a landmark 2011 case, Brown versus Entertainment Merchants Association, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that video games are a form of expression protected by the First Amendment. This put them on the same level as books and films and gave more legitimacy to gaming as an art form. And there were two sides to this coin. You had games like Dysphoria by Anna Anthropy, which was a short abstract game about her experiences with hormone replacement therapy. On the other hand, you had games like Kindergarten Killer on sites like Newgrounds, which was made by a 15-year-old going under the handle Gary Short, featured a school shooting scenario where he plays a crazed janitor. Now, while it is violent, controversial, and a little taboo, he was using the game as a political statement about violence. And love it or hate it with these games, there's something to be said about the freedom that was to be had on the early internet. As the years went on, it's pretty obvious that the golden age is not going to last, but it's kind of hard to anticipate the end of a golden age when you're in the middle of experiencing it. Around 2007 and 2008, smartphones were getting better and the mobile app stores were releasing. This ushered in a brand new platform to release games on, a more profitable one too. And with the launch of the mobile app stores, Steve Jobs famously refused to support Flash on the iPhone because he's a fucking asshole. He kind of dressed like a dildo too. But fret not, Google also dropped Flash on all of the Android operating systems. But it was 2008 and we really couldn't have shit. But this didn't stop anybody from releasing the coolest shit that has ever graced Chrome and Firefox. You had dope-ass shooters like Raze and Raze 2. You had a new form of RTS in the shape of Age of War and Age of War 2. Bloons Tower Defense was getting better and better every year. Crush the Castle was getting ready to walk so that Angry Birds could run. QWOP was going viral for being the hardest shit ever. Shout out Bennett Foddy. And the Happy Wheels craze was in full swing. And to think that browser games were at the front page of YouTube almost every single day in the form of Let's Plays and tutorials is kind of insane to me. Around this time, I didn't have a PC, but my mom had a MacBook. And it kind of sucked dick, but I could play the shit out of some browser games. All I wanted in the world was to play Minecraft in 2008. But fortunately, about a year later, there was about 100 clones all over the internet. And they all fucking sucked, but I could put blocks down. Yeah. At the same time, the whole zombie survival game craze was going on, and while I loved the idea of DayZ at that time, I was limited to Dead Frontier. But to its credit, it was actually pretty badass when you didn't have anything to play. It was a top-down survival RPG, and it had trading and pretty okay, serviceable combat. And even though the numbers kept dwindling over time, Flash games endured. This went on for a few years until December 31st, 2020, Adobe announced that they were finally officially ending all support for the Flash player. This was the final nail in the coffin. And among Adobe's many war crimes against their own community, this is probably the one that upset me the most. And it's not about a piece of software becoming obsolete. I still use Adobe Flash on my computer to play the Ninja Kiwi install on Steam. The real issue was the threat of losing an entire era of internet history. Tens of thousands of games and animations that had defined the online experience for millions was at risk of simply vanishing forever. But fortunately, the story doesn't just end there. Fortunately, no matter how small or insignificant a piece of information could be on the internet, somebody's going to fight to store and protect that information. And the fear of losing a massive gaming catalog that spanned 15 to 20 years ended up sparking one of the most incredible volunteer preservation efforts the internet's ever seen. And this all culminated in a project called Flashpoint Archive. Started by Ben Lattimore in 2017, shortly after the announcement of Adobe ending support for Flash, Flashpoint Archive is a massive community-driven effort to preserve web games and animations. They use a launcher and a local proxy server to create a torrent that you can use to trick all these old games into thinking they're still online, preserving them perfectly in a playable offline state. As of today, they've cataloged over 200,000 Flash games and animations, a history that otherwise would have been lost to time. And they're not the only ones. Websites like Armor Games have started using emulators like Ruffled to keep their own libraries alive. Ninja Kiwi ported their entire library over to Steam, and you can download it for free. I don't know why I said for free. I guess that kind of makes sense. It'd be kind of fucked up if they charged you for it. And it would be kind of confusing outside looking in on why there'd be so much effort taken to preserve these games. But they weren't just games. They were the pioneers of the indie scene. Back when there were pretty much only AAA and AA studios, all of the indie games, for the most part, started out in browsers, and they were polished and mastered on better software later. And from a historical perspective, it does represent a version of the internet that is for the most part gone. The Wild West time before every app and service was trying to make their own walled garden of products and app services. and before everything you looked at on the internet was either an ad or an algorithmically curated feed, there was a legacy to uphold. And thanks to the tireless work of archivists and data hoarders, that legacy is now safe. Now, I have a question for you all. What was your favorite Flash game? Was it a simple and addictive platformer? A sprawling epic like Adventure Quest? Or were you the fucked up kid playing all the torture games next to me in the computer lab? Do me a favor. One of my favorite things in the comments of these videos is to reminisce with other people who feel the same or just want to share memories with me. So go ahead and comment and tell me how you feel or what you remember about the Flash games of old.